Hi, everyone. It's Natalie here. I'm happy to have you tune in. And today I'm sharing how to nurture and protect the sacred contract, the contract that a parent and child has to actually help us reduce their children's misbehaviors. So, first of all, we need to understand what is this contract that we all parents have with our children. And I would like to share with you that all of this I've learned from my mentor, Dr. Gabor Mate. And this is, I found the work that he's done and what he's sharing in his books and his videos are a very important work that has tremendously helped me as a parent. And having studied his work as well, and this is what I thought it would be very useful to every parent to know this information. So, what is that sacred contract that we have with our kids? And actually, from the time from their birth, we have that contract with them. And what it says, the contract is that I'm going to bring you into this world and look after you. And I think as a parent, we all instinctually have that in us, and even in the animal kingdom, same thing with a mother bear, a mother duck. This is the contract that every parent has with their own children. And I'm going to look after you means I'm going to be responsive to you. I'm going to reciprocate and attune and be in touch with you, with all your needs. Because a baby and a child knows that they can't survive on their own. That's why our children, they remain with us until they are in their late teens. When they are 18 years old, that's when they are ready to be on their own. And we know now that still at that age, some of our teenagers are not ready to make that jump. So there is a development stage of our children, and children needs parents physically. They need a caregiver if the parents are not available to help them be able to survive in this world, both physically and emotionally. So I'm going to ask you to do a quick exercise right now, just to bring you and attune you to this contract, because this contract is not something superficial. It's not something that's written in paper, but it's something that we can feel from the inside, all of us parents. So if you're open to it, and it's just going to be a quick exercise, so don't worry. You can close your eyes if it helps you to get in touch with yourself first. And if you don't want to close your eyes, you don't have to. But I'm going to invite you to maybe take some deep breath and just feel your breath. And then I'm going to ask you to imagine you holding your baby in your own. So if you had more than one baby, perhaps the last one or the first one, whichever one you want, imagining holding your baby. And how do you feel towards your baby when you first met your baby? What is the feeling that you had for the baby? What did you want to say to your baby when you first held your baby? What did you say? Maybe you don't remember, but if right now you were holding your baby, what would you be saying to your baby? And what message, if there was one message you would want to give your baby, what would be that message? And once you finish saying your message, you can slowly open your eyes if your eyes were closed. And you probably felt that connection already. I know it's not difficult for us parents, especially for mothers, to go back there and remember when we first held our baby, how that felt like, what we wanted or say to them, and the message we wanted them to know when they just came into this world. So this is the contract, actually. This is the actual contract. So we can always go back to this contract. And there are ways to keep nurturing this contract, because I think we live in a very busy world where we can forget about that contract. And we can get distracted with beliefs, with what society say we need to do, and so on. So we can easily forget about that contract once we get really busy in life. And that's for all of us. So whenever we get a little bit kind of disconnected with that contract, we can always go back to it just by doing this one exercise that you just did right now. So maybe you're at your wit's end with your child and not knowing what to do, and you're looking for answers. And a great way to reconnect with what's important for you and your child, and how you can get back in touch with the contract that you have with your child, is to do this exercise. So what are the ways then to nurture this contract so we get less resistance from our children? Because this contract is the foundation of our relationship with our child. And that's the relationship that a child has with us, is their first relationship, and also the most important relationship when the child is little. So the successful key to parenting is to have this unconditional relationship with our child that feels strong, safe, and nurturing. So we all know by now that children needs to feel safe, and children needs to feel that we're nurturing them, and that gives them strength, and that builds self-confidence in them. But what usually gets in the way of that unconditional relationship for us to show up to meet their needs so they feel safe? And a lot of time, the common thing is our expectations of how they need to be, what they need to do, how they need to act or respond to us. And often it's the unrealistic expectation. We all have expectations, and expectations are good. They are a way to measure. But if our expectations are unrealistic, then that creates problems. That creates more disconnection with our children, because often they can't meet the expectations. And when they can't meet the expectations, they don't feel good about themselves. And if on top of that, we as parents become angry or we disconnect with them, they will feel it, and they don't feel safe anymore in those moments. So it's important that when there are conflicts going on, that we revisit our own expectations. I know I had to do this when there was a lot of conflicts going on, and I've shared that with you when I first started homeschooling my children, and I realized that the expectations I had of them were not realistic, and I had to go back and question those expectations that I had. So where do our expectations come from? Most of our expectations comes from our beliefs. And where do our beliefs come from? The first set of beliefs we establish in life happens within the first 7 years of life. So between 0 and 7. So that's a good thing to know as a parent as well for our own children, especially those of you who have little children, is that first 7 years of life, that's when the child is going to form that first set of beliefs about themselves, beliefs about the world. So how do beliefs form? Is like the child is always being influenced by what they see and what they hear and what's being mirrored to them when it comes to behaviors. So this is how our beliefs are formed. Those first 7 years of life, we're just absorbing information, downloading information, and we put meaning to what we're seeing in our environment. So we have different beliefs because we all grew up in different environments, and we have different kind of behaviors being mirrored to us, words being said in our environment, and so on. So if as a parent, we have certain childhood needs that were never fulfilled, we're going to form beliefs according to those needs that were not fulfilled. For instance, if as a parent, I don't feel that I was smart as a child, I may want to not have my child feel the same way. So I would then want my child to be the opposite. So if I'm not smart, I'm going to make sure that my children are smart, because when I did not feel smart, then I didn't feel like I was good enough. I didn't feel perhaps I was worthy. I didn't feel that I mattered. And so that was a painful situation for me as a child. I'm just giving you an example here. So therefore, some parents will then say, I don't want my child to feel the same way that I did. So I'm going to make sure that they are the opposite of me. And then my expectations then are going to be set according to how I felt as a child and how I don't want them to feel a certain way. So I have some beliefs around now how my child should be and feel. Or another example, if a parent was raised in an environment where there were high expectations, and that was what the parent experienced, and maybe it did something good for them. Now the parent may have the same high expectations for their own children. So that's very common. Things that we've learned, beliefs that we've acquired, we tend to pass that on, especially if it worked to some extent and it's ingrained in us. Those are the same beliefs that gets passed down, that as a parent, I need to set the bar high. I need to set these high expectations for my children. And then I have that expectation that they need to meet those high level expectations that I have for them. So we usually, and I know a lot of it is not conscious, but it's on an unconscious level, that we expect our children to have those same desires that we have for them. And those desires, again, are based on our past experiences and the beliefs that were formed from those past experiences. So, for example, if we were not seen or accepted when we did not get the grades, then we maybe have a desire for our kids to do well at school. So what we did not have as well, we may be wanting that for our children, and thinking that if they have the grades, so they are good at athletics and so on, then they are going to feel seen and accepted, which we didn't have growing up. And that's what happens for most of us parents. We want the best for our children, and we think that the best is what we didn't get. So then we are going to make sure now that they get it. Unfortunately, when we do this, we are raising our children according to our own needs and not necessarily according to their needs. And so this is something that we need to actually reflect upon. If that's how we're basing our expectations for our children, it's because of what we didn't get in the past. That's why we want it for them. Is that a good thing or not? It may be, but often it may not be as well. So being willing to look at that. Another example, if we were not validated when we were children, we don't want our children to experience that pain because we know what it feels like to not having the external validation of the praise. And as children, we need validation from our own parents and praise from them when we're doing something good. And when we don't receive that, it makes us question our own self, our own ability, our own survival at the core of it. So perhaps now we want to make sure that our children are validated, but then we are, in the way we want our children to be validated is by other people validating them, whereas it's the parent who needs to validate, not other people only, but coming from the parents. And that is what will nurture the contract, because our children needs us to reflect to them who they are and not necessarily just from other people. So it's important to understand why we have certain expectations and where did they come from. And when we reflect on our expectation, we'll come to the beliefs that we have. And those beliefs are usually the beliefs we have about ourselves. And often, because those beliefs were formed when we were very little, those beliefs are also outdated and not very useful in the present moment. And if we're setting expectations for our children based on those beliefs, then a lot of time you'll see that they don't work. And now you're understanding why they won't work, because beliefs that were set when we were little were not probably true. First of all, because we were little, we were children ourselves, and it's not serving us today. And most likely it's not going to serve our own children. So what do I suggest then? And for us parents to do is to, instead of making it about us, about how is that going to meet my expectations, shift the attention to your child, because your children needs us. They need us to support them, to create safety for them, to protect them, and so that they feel they can explore who they are and become who they are, and they have the ability to become who they are, and also have our permission to grow and blossom in who they are meant to be. So then this will lead us to, what are the key roles as parents that are going to help us to nurture the contract? So the first one is to reflect to our children their true essence, to recognize who they are, their strengths, their weaknesses as well, what they're good at, what they need help with, to mirror that to them, to show that to them, and to speak the truth to them. So children needs to hear. They need the encouragement. They need our guidance, our support. And also showing our children that they're worthy of love no matter what. That just them coming into this world, and that's what's the contract about, that we are going to accept and love them the way they are. And they deserve and they're worthy of this love and attention and care just by being themselves. That they don't have to change anything. They don't have to work at it. Just by them coming into this world, we helping them to come into this world means that they're worthy of that care, that attention, that love. And allowing then the child to feel safe in their parents' presence. So they feel safe to make choices. And we can create the boundaries. So we are not just allowing them to do anything and everything. That's not what I'm saying. But within safe boundaries, as a parent, we know what's safe. We are the adult in the room. So within that safe boundary, giving them the ability to make choices and guide them. And in, creating that safe environment for them to start exploring who they are, exploring their talents, their gift within the boundaries. Another thing is, how can we nurture the contract is by communicating to them that it's okay to make mistakes. Making mistakes doesn't mean that it's going to threaten the connection with us. So I know this is something that I had to learn, and I'm still paying attention to that because I have a tendency to get upset when mistakes are made. So, and that's, again, a behavior that I've learned that was mirrored to me. So making sure, if we know that, those are the things that were mirrored to us as parents and that are not very useful, and they can be destructive, it's to become aware of that. So allowing our children to make mistakes and making sure that it's communicated to them that when they make the mistakes, that they still are accepted and that they are loved. And how do we demonstrate that to them is that when they make the mistakes, that we can remain calm, we can remain understanding towards what just happened, and that we're not also going to disconnect from them just because they've made a mistake. Another important thing is to allow our children to express their feelings by giving them permission to speak their truth. Not an easy one for parents, but an important one. That they know that they can say what they need to say, how they're feeling about different various things that are going on in the house and with us, and that they can say it without having dire consequences, meaning that they're not going to be punished, yelled at, or sent away just because they are speaking their truth. And also allow and hold a child when they're flooded with emotions, especially when they're little and they are overwhelmed with emotions. They don't know what to do with the emotions. They just feel it, and it's dysregulating them in that moment. It's important that as a parent, we can actually get down to their level, make eye contact, and hold them if they allow us to hold them. Because when our children are in that state of dysregulation, often they are very afraid and they don't know what to do. And they will look up to the parent, which is us, for help. And if we become dysregulated, then they feel really lost, and they feel like, oh my gosh, the person who is supposed to support me is also in the same situation. So I can't even go to them. I can't rely on them. I can't trust them. So very, very important that as a parent, especially for small children, that we learn how to regulate our own emotions so that we can just be there and we don't need to do anything in those moments. And usually it's best not to do anything, but just to connect with the child with through the senses, meaning eye contact, touch, staying calm, and just holding them in this moment when they're feeling afraid so they can feel safe again with us. So very important then to be able to demonstrate to a child how to regulate their emotions. And the best way is by mirroring that to the child. When we have strong emotions, how are we responding to them? How are we handling our own strong emotions? Right? And not getting upset, not getting out of control ourselves. Because if we show them that we're getting out of control all the time and we're not able to manage it, then that's what they're going to reflect to us as well. Remember, the child, the first 7 years of life is absorbing, copying, imitating everything we do. So they are learning how to regulate by how we regulate. So if we can't regulate, for that matter, they're not going to know how to regulate either. So that's another thing. It's very important that as parents, we learn how to regulate our own emotions. And there are ways to learn this. It's never too late. And I know that we're most likely never taught how to do that, which is the unfortunate thing. And we need to learn how to become aware of when our bodies are getting flooded, when we're getting triggered, and what to do with those emotions, how to manage those emotions. And that's what I teach parents. So if you're wanting to learn this, feel free to reach out to me. I'll be happy to help you and to guide you there. And also mirror self-compassion, empathy, vulnerability, and patience to a child. Because it's important we mirror to them that it's okay to be vulnerable, and mirror to them that it's normal to have empathy for another one and to have compassion towards ourselves and others, and that we can be patient. And that's we can only do that again by doing it for ourselves first. If we don't know how to do it for ourselves, then we're not going to be able to do this for another. That's when we can become very resentful. When we need to do that for our children, often parents come to me and they're starting this work and they're saying, when my child wants this, I get upset and I don't want to do that. And often it's because the parent themselves are not doing it for them. They're not taking the time to nurture themselves. They're not taking the time to listen to what's going on within themselves. They're not taking the time to be compassionate towards themselves. And if we don't do this for ourselves, we can't give it to our children. It's just the way things. If we don't eat, we're not going to have the strength, the stamina to take care of our children. It's like put on your oxygen mask first and then put on your child's oxygen mask. So then what is the one thing, the number one thing to nurture that contract? Because our children are so dependent on us physically and emotionally. And that relationship we are establishing with our child is so important because they're learning from that first relationship with the parents. And that's going to affect them later on in life in their future relationships with friends, with a partner, and so on. So the number one thing is to learn to be present with our child and being aware of what is happening in their environment. At what development stage are they at? And what can we expect when they are at these various development stages as a child? What is really going on? For instance, for the longest time, and I've just learned that in the past 2 years, that what we call the terrible twos is just a development stage where the child is learning how to form their willpower. And how they form their willpower is by using their counter will, by learning to say no. That's why it's the terrible twos, because they say no to everything. Do you want this? No. Let me do this for you? No. Everything is a no. And we find it very, very triggering for us as parents. And we're at our wits' end because we're looking at it from the lenses that the child is just targeting us and just doesn't want to listen to us. Whereas what is really going on is a development stage in their growth. And when we can understand that it's just a development stage, and if they don't know how to say no now, they can't develop a willpower later on in life to say no to others, to say no to the things that are not good for them. And do we want that? So therefore, by educating ourselves about the development stages of our children, to be present with them, to reflect to them who they are, and also to know that our children, and I think I've posted that before, is that our children don't wake up and want to mess our day or want to make us upset. No, that's never their choice. So their choice is always to stay connected. They want the contract to remain intact with us. That's what they truly want. And their behaviors, their misbehaviors, is just because perhaps we've set these expectations that are not realistic for them at their development stage they're at, given the environment they're in and everything else that they're experiencing in the moment. And it's our job to actually understand what is really going on. But if we are also not taking the time to understand ourselves, what's going on with us, then it's very difficult to understand them. So that's very important. And another important thing is, if there's one thing, so not breaking that connection with our child, meaning also not shaming. Let's not give a child the message that who they are at their core is wrong, because they're not. And know that the damage it does when a child feels that they're wrong, that they're not enough, that they're not worthy, that they are different, that they don't belong. And we want to prevent that as much as we can, because this is at the core of what creates a lot of disconnection within themselves. And the disconnection then show up in the form of misbehaviors, because the child is starting to believe something that is not true, because that's what is being reflected to them in their environment, maybe not intentionally, but often unconsciously being reflected to them. So setting realistic expectation as our children grow is important, and also to examine our own expectation to understand why we have these expectations. Where did they come from? And what is the purpose of having this expectation? What needs are we thinking they're going to fill when these expectations are met? Is it my needs or my children's needs? Very important to differentiate between the two, because if it's mine, that may not necessarily be what my child needs. And do those expectations fit and align with my child's temperament, the age, and the stage of development they're at? So if you can do that, especially if you're experiencing a lot of misbehaviors from the child, they're acting out a lot of tantrums, perhaps. And a lot of time it's about the expectations that we have set for them. So going back to the expectations, review that and reset the expectations. And I can tell you, when I did this, I changed my expectations. I was less triggered, and my children had less tantrums, less strong emotional reactions. And we were able to work together in a more calm and peaceful environment. And I've worked with other parents like this that have gone back to review the expectations and change them. And when they did, because they understood what their own needs were and what are their children's needs are, then it reestablished the contract. And they were able to nurture that contract with their children. And when the contract is being nurtured, therefore the needs of our children are being met. And when their needs are met, then there's less need for misbehaviors, because we know now, and if you haven't watched my other videos, you can watch them, that the misbehaviors, the tantrums, and so on are just symptoms of needs and then of the child that are not being met by us. And so if we can understand that, then we can go back and see what is it that's missing for our child. What do they need that we, for whatever reason, have not been able to meet these needs? So this is what I wanted to share with you today. Hopefully that makes sense. If not, feel free to reach out to me. You can send me a direct message and I will answer your questions. If you're wanting to be curious about yourself, what's coming up when you're triggered, when your child is not meeting your expectations and how upset you get, again, that's yours to reflect upon, not your child. It's not your child's fault. It's something within yourself. And it's very important that you work with what is coming up for you when you're triggered. And when you do that work, then you can be more calm. You put your own oxygen mask on, and then you can help your child. So certainly if this work is calling you, or you're even curious about this work, how you can do it, you can also reach out to me. I'll be happy to have a call with you if you want to call, or just through messaging, I can share more information with you. All right, so you take care of yourself, parents. I know there's lots going on as a parent, and it's important to care for yourself. It's important to fill your tank so that you can be present with your children. And the more present, the more you can meet their needs, the less the misbehaviors. So thank you for listening. Take care, everyone, and I will see you very soon.